My name is Clara Whitmore, and 3 months after my husband passed away, I thought the worst was finally behind me. Grief comes in waves. Some days I could stand in the quiet kitchen and feel almost normal. Other days I would reach for his coffee mug, and my hands would start shaking. After 42 years of marriage, I was still learning how to live without the man I thought I knew. That Tuesday morning, the sky over Vermont was dull and gray, the kind of sky that made everything feel heavier. I was sitting in the living room we had shared for decades, flipping through sympathy cards I could not bring myself to throw away. I was in his favorite chair, the one by the window, because it still held the faint smell of his aftershave. It gave me a strange kind of comfort. The phone rang. I almost ignored it. Most calls these days were from well-meaning neighbors checking on me or from companies trying to sell something I did not need, but something made me answer. Mrs. Whitmore, this is Daniel Rodas calling, your husband's attorney. My heartbeat quickened. We had already had the will reading. Everything seemed straightforward. There was nothing left to discuss. Or so I believed. Daniel cleared his throat. I found something in your husband's files. Something that requires your attention. And Mrs. Whitmore, please do not mention this call to your son yet. You need to see this first. A cold heaviness settled in my chest. There is a certain tone people use when they are about to deliver news that can break your world in half. I recognized it instantly. Within an hour, I was in my car heading to his office with no idea that my life was about to be divided into a before and an after. Daniel Rodas greeted me with the kind of tight smile people use when they are trying to soften a blow. His office was warm and polished, full of dark wood and framed certificates, but that morning it felt cold to me. He gestured for me to sit, and I lowered myself into the chair opposite his desk, trying to steady my breath. Clara, thank you for coming so quickly, he said quietly. I am afraid what I am about to show you may be difficult. He reached into a drawer and placed a large envelope on the desk. My name was written on it in my husband's handwriting. It was dated 6 months before his death. I frowned. We already handled the will, Daniel. Why is there another envelope? He folded his hands, choosing his words with deliberate care. This is a second will. A separate document your husband created privately. He asked that it be kept in a different location, and he insisted that you be the first to see it after his passing. My mouth went dry. A second will, why would he even need one? Daniel slid the document toward me. As I read the lines, the words blurred together until one sentence snapped into sharp focus. My entire estate is to be transferred to Marissa Delgado. Every property, every account, every policy. I stared at the page as if it might change if I looked long enough. The house Jim and I built together. The savings we set aside for retirement, even his life insurance, all left to a woman I had never heard of. There was more, Daniel added. He pushed another stack of papers to me. These are financial statements from the last 16 years. Your husband made monthly payments of $2,000 to Miss Delgado. And there is also the matter of a house he helped her purchase. My chest tightened. 16 years of payments I never knew about. A house bought with money he earned while telling me we could not afford basic repairs. Daniel leaned forward. Clara, I believe there may be grounds to challenge this will. But before we take any action, you need to know everything. For the first time since Jim died, I realized I had not just lost a husband. I had lost the truth about the life we had shared. I left Daniel's office with the envelope clutched to my chest like it was something alive and dangerous. I drove back to my house on autopilot, my mind stuck on one name, Marissa Delgado. 16 years of payments, a second will, a house, all tied to a woman I had never met. That night I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, questions flooded in. Who was she and why had my husband built a secret life with her while I cooked him dinner and held his hand through hospital stays? By morning I could not stand the not knowing. I typed her name into my phone and an address popped up not far from my own. I stared at it for a long moment before my body moved on its own. I grabbed my coat, locked the door behind me and drove. The neighborhood was quiet, lined with tall maples and wide porches. The house at the address was beautiful. A craftsman-style home with a wraparound veranda and flower beds blooming despite the cool air. It was the exact kind of house Jim used to say we could never afford. Seeing it made my throat tighten. I parked a few houses down. I told myself I only needed to look to see who she was. But then the front door opened. A woman stepped out, about 50, with warm brown skin and dark hair pulled into a loose ponytail. She wore jeans and a simple blouse. She moved with the ease of someone who belonged in a place like that. Then a teenage girl followed her out. 16, maybe 17, laughing about something as she looped her arm around the woman's waist. They looked like a family, a real family. And the girl had features so familiar it made me gasp. The same cheekbones as my son at that age, the same smile. My heart slammed against my ribs. I felt the truth long before I accepted it. This was not just a woman my husband supported. She was not a passing mistake or a one-time lapse in judgment. For 16 years, he had been raising a second family 20 minutes from our home, a family he had chosen to give everything to. While I sat in our quiet house, believing we were building a life together, he had been building another one without me. 2 days passed before I could gather myself enough to speak to anyone. I barely ate. I barely slept. I kept replaying the scene of that woman and her daughter walking down the front steps, laughing as if they had everything they needed. And my husband had made sure they did. On Saturday morning, my son Logan showed up at my door with boxes in his arms. He pushed inside without waiting to be invited, like he always had. "Mom, we should start clearing out the garage. There are tools and equipment I can sell or maybe use." His voice was casual, too casual. I watched him pour himself coffee from the pot I had just brewed, the same way his father always did. For a moment I saw them both. The man who betrayed me and the son I raised, to be honest. "Logan, sit down for a minute. I need to talk to you." He froze for a moment, then forced a smile. "Sure. About what?" I met his eyes. "Do you know someone named Marissa Delgado?" He blinked once, twice, and something in his expression tightened. "No, should I?" "You are lying." My voice surprised even me. It was steadier than I felt. His jaw clenched, the same tell he had when he was a boy trying to avoid trouble. "Mom, I do not know who you are talking about." I picked up the folder from Daniel and slid it across the table. Logan looked at it, then slowly opened it. When he saw the name, the payments, the house, his face drained of color. "How long have you known?" I asked quietly. He swallowed. "About 5 years." The words hit me harder than anything Daniel had shown me. 5 years. My own son had carried this secret. 5 years of smiling at me across dinner tables. 5 years of watching me celebrate anniversaries, holidays, milestones with a man he knew was living a lie. "Why did you not tell me?" I whispered. Logan sank into the chair. "Dad told me not to. He said he was leaving you eventually. And he said that when it happened I would get the house. He said you would be okay. That you could downsize." "Downsize?" The words stabbed deeper than I expected. I stared at him. "You chose silence because you wanted the house." He looked down at his hands. I did not want to get in the middle. I thought it was best. "No, you chose what benefited you. You chose him." He reached for me, but I stepped back. "Get out, Logan." "Mom, please." I pointed to the door. "I will not be betrayed twice in one lifetime." This time he left. After Logan walked out of my home, a strange silence settled over the house. It was not the silence of grief anymore. It was something sharper, something that made every breath feel heavier. I realized then that I could not move forward until I knew every detail of what Jim had been hiding from me. That night, long after the sun had gone down, I found myself standing outside the door to his home office. I had avoided that room since the funeral. It felt like trespassing, but now I knew the truth. He had carved out a secret life, and that room held the tools he used to do it. I turned on the light. Everything looked exactly as he left it. His polished desk, his neatly arranged folders, his worn leather chair. It all felt staged, like a version of himself he wanted me to see. I began opening drawers one by one. Most held nothing more than old receipts, manuals, and outdated paperwork. But when I reached the bottom drawer of the filing cabinet, something felt wrong. The drawer did not go back as far as it should have. I ran my fingers along the inside until I felt a small metal tab tucked behind the files. When I pulled it, a false panel slid free. Behind it was a narrow compartment, and inside the compartment were 3 thick manila folders and a small lockbox. My hands trembled as I pulled the folders out. The first was labeled MD Marissa Delgado. Inside were 16 years of bank transfers, mortgage documents, insurance forms, even printouts of gift orders for her daughter. He had kept everything methodical, organized, secret. The second folder chilled me more. It was labeled Eldu. Inside were emails, years' worth of conversations between my husband and my son discussing his plan to leave me. Lines like "she will manage" and "we cannot tell her yet." My own son had been part of the planning. But the third folder was the one that finally broke something in me. It was labeled Justifications. Inside were pages of my husband's handwriting, journal entries, lists of complaints, moments he had twisted into proof that our marriage was failing, nights I had fallen asleep early, times I had forgotten small dates while juggling work and bills. He had been building a case against me for years. At the bottom of the lockbox was a final note written 2 weeks before his death. "If I die before filing, everything will go to Marissa. Clara will fight, but she will lose." I read that line again and again until the words no longer felt real. He did not just betray me. He planned to erase me. 3 days passed before I gathered the courage to return to the house on Maple Hill Road. This time I was not there to sit in my car and watch from a distance. I needed answers. I needed to look the woman who shared 16 years of my husband's life in the eyes and understand what she knew. When I walked up the wooden steps of her porch, my legs felt heavier with each step. Wind chimes clinked softly above me, the kind people hang to bring a sense of peace. There was nothing peaceful about the storm inside my chest. I rang the doorbell. It opened almost at once. Marissa stood there wearing an apron dusted with flour and a soft smile that faded the moment she saw my face. "Can I help you?" she asked, her tone polite but cautious. "Are you Marissa Delgado?" I asked. "Yes, and you are?" "My name is Clara Whitmore. I believe we need to talk about Jim." Her eyes widened. A flicker of something warm and painful crossed her face. "You knew him." She opened her door wider as if welcoming me. "Please come in. It is always comforting to speak to someone who cared about him." The living room was warm and lived in. Photos lined the mantel. Photos of Jim, photos of Sophia, photos of all three of them together. He looked younger in those pictures, lighter, happier. Marissa gestured for me to sit. "Before I do, I need to ask, how did you know Jim?" Her voice softened at the memory. "We met at the clinic where I work. He told me he was a widower. He said losing his wife was the hardest thing he had ever gone through. But that meeting me helped him believe he could move forward again." The words nearly knocked the breath out of me. A widower. I reached into my purse for the envelope Daniel had given me. "I am not dead, Marissa. I was married to Jim Whitmore for 42 years until 3 months ago. Until the day he actually died." Marissa stared at the documents in disbelief. Her face drained of color as she read. When she looked back up, her voice trembled. "He told me you were gone. He said you had past years before we met. He lied about everything." I nodded. "And there is more you need to know. Much more." After leaving Marissa's house that afternoon, I sat in my car for almost 20 minutes before I could even start the engine. She had not known. That much was clear. She had loved Jim with the devotion of someone who believed she was chosen. And he had fed her that belief with the same ease he used on me 4 decades earlier. But the truth was no longer a private wound. It had become a legal matter, a matter of justice. The next morning I walked into Daniel Rhodes' office with the folders, the emails, and the handwritten note my husband left in his lockbox. Daniel read everything in silence, the way attorneys do when they are assembling a case in their minds piece by piece. When he was done, he leaned back in his chair and exhaled slowly. "Clara, this is not just evidence. This is a blueprint of intent. He transferred assets with the purpose of cutting you out. That is fraudulent conveyance and it does not hold up in probate court. So we fight," I said. "We do more than fight," he replied. "We challenge every transfer, every account, every document tied to Miss Delgado, and we move to invalidate the second will entirely." The court hearings began a few weeks later. Each session felt like peeling back another layer of a life I never actually lived. The transfers to Marissa, the down payment on her house, the separate insurance policy, even the monthly payments he disguised as consulting expenses. None of it held up. The judge reviewed the evidence with a growing frown. In the end, the ruling was clear. The second will was void. The transfers were illegal. Everything returned to the marital estate. Then came the part no one expected. "Miss Whitmore," the judge said, You are entitled to pursue compensation from Miss Delgado for the house and the vehicle your husband helped her obtain. Do you wish to proceed? I looked at Marissa across the courtroom. She sat holding her daughter's hand, looking smaller than I remembered. No, Your Honor, I said. She may keep the house. She and her daughter were misled just as I was. A quiet murmur rolled through the room. Real justice had never been about taking everything. It was about finally reclaiming myself. 3 weeks after the court ruling, I asked Marissa to meet with me one last time. Not in a courtroom, not in the house my husband bought for her. I chose a quiet little cafe off Main Street, the kind of place where no one knew either of us, and no memories lingered in the corners. She arrived looking nervous, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. I could tell she had lost sleep. I could tell she had spent days trying to reconcile the man she loved with the man revealed in those court documents. Thank you for coming, I said. She nodded, eyes lowered. I owe you that much. I reached into my bag and placed a small manila envelope on the table. She hesitated before opening it. Inside were photocopies of pages from the folder labeled justifications. There were also drafts of letters he had written to her. Letters where he praised her one moment and listed complaints about her the next. Notes about feeling suffocated. Remarks about her insecurities after pregnancy. Even a line about needing space from her daughter. As she read, I watched the denial fade from her expression. Then came understanding, and then came the kind of heartbreak that goes beyond betrayal. It was the realization that the version of Jim she loved had always been curated, controlled, performed. Why are you showing me this? She whispered, voice cracking. Because you deserve the truth and because I want you to understand something. He did not leave me because I failed him. And he did not love you because you were perfect. He loved the version of you he created just like the version of me he created. If you had become his entire world, he would have eventually grown restless. He would have found someone else to build a secret life with. Her eyes filled. So he would have left me too. I nodded gently. Yes, it was only a matter of time. Marissa wiped her cheeks and looked at me with a quiet strength I had not seen in her before. Thank you, she said, not for the pain but for the truth. It was the only closure either of us would ever get. 1 year after Jim passed, the house finally felt like mine. Not because the court had returned it to me but because I had chosen to reclaim it. I repainted the walls. I replaced the old furniture he insisted we keep for decades. I even planted roses in the backyard, something he always said would be too much work. For the first time in a long while, I woke up each morning with a sense of peace. Not joy, not yet, but peace is its own kind of victory. Logan and I had not spoken since the day I asked him to leave. Sometimes I wondered if that distance would ever close. Other times I reminded myself that betrayal, even when it comes from your own child, does not heal just because you wish it would. Healing demands honesty, and my son had not found his yet. But the biggest change came in a way I never expected. I met Samuel Pierce at a grief support group, a gentle man in his early 70s who had lost his wife to cancer. While the rest of us tiptoed around our pain, Samuel spoke plainly. He talked about love, about mistakes, about the things he wished he had said sooner. He did not hide from the truth the way Jim always had. We began having coffee after meetings, then walks around the lake, then dinners where conversation felt easy, unhurried. Samuel never asked me to pretend. He never tried to fix the parts of me that were still bruised. He simply listened. And sometimes that was more healing than any apology Jim could have ever offered me. One evening as we sat on a bench watching the sunset stretch across the water, Samuel turned to me. You know, Clara, he said, you survived something that would have broken a lot of people, but you are still here and you are still kind. That is something to be proud of. His words stayed with me long after. Maybe the real revenge was not in winning court battles or exposing lies. Maybe it was in choosing to build a life that had nothing to do with the man who tried so hard to diminish me. A life that was finally fully my own. As the months passed, I found myself waking each day with a clarity I had not felt in years. Not the clarity that comes from having all the answers, but the kind that comes from finally telling yourself the truth. Jim had built a life out of secrets. Logan had protected those secrets because he believed there was something to gain. And Marissa had lived inside those secrets without ever realizing she had been placed there. But I had stepped out of them. I often thought back to the day Daniel first called me. The fear in my chest, the confusion, the feeling that my world was splitting apart. I did not know then that the destruction of that world would become the foundation of a better one. If there is one thing I have learned, it is this: betrayal is not the end of your story. It is the moment you decide what comes next. You can cling to the lies that hurt you, or you can walk toward a life built on honesty. Even if that honesty stings at first, I chose honesty. I chose myself. Some nights I still sit on the porch with a cup of tea and watch the sky fade into evening. Sometimes Samuel joins me. Sometimes I sit alone. And on those quiet nights, I feel something I never expected to feel again. Safety. Not because someone else provides it, but because I finally provide it for myself. If my story has reached you in a moment of doubt or pain, I hope you remember this. You deserve the truth. You deserve loyalty, and you deserve a life that reflects your worth.